Six Flags Darien Lake is often regarded as one of the worst Six Flags parks, and while I disagree with that statement, as I think it's a decent park, I can agree that the coaster lineup is pretty bad. The park only has 2 good coasters, and those coasters are swapped frequently. Something noticeable about this video is that my placements differ greatly from other enthusiasts. This is my ranking of Six Flags Darien Lake's roller coasters. Number 7, Mind Eraser, ranking 137 out of the 139 coasters I've ridden. I didn't ride the kiddie coaster, so number 7, the last in the park, is Mind Eraser. No surprise here. I went into Mind Eraser expecting the worst, and I got the worst. It wasn't particularly painful, except for one violent jolt I'll talk about in just a minute, but it wasn't enjoyable. The whole ride is shaking violently, and it is impossible to even process what is happening because of how much your head is being shaken. The padding makes this ride tolerable, but the headbanging still gave me a headache after the ride. And on top of all of this, the ride just looks bad. It's over a ton of algae, and the track looks like it hasn't been painted in years. This section of the park is always deserted as well. After the shallow drop, the pain kicks in. The most violent jolt I've experienced on a ride is at the top of the rollover, when the train feels like it is attacking the rider. The train hits riders in the back hard, which I wasn't expecting. This happened throughout every ascent and descent of the ride, which does not help. The Sidewinder and inline twists were full of headbanging. The rest of the ride was tolerable, but overall Mind Racer is by far the worst coaster I've experienced. It was so bad that you can hear my dad speaking in excitement when the ride was done.
That sucks.
Number 6, Boomerang, ranked 125 out of the 139 coasters I've ridden. Boomerang at Six Flags Darien Lake is often regarded as one of the best boomerangs, and while the setting of the ride is beautiful, it was in my opinion the worst I've been on. The only other rough boomerang I've ridden was the one at Six Flags St. Louis, which was very rough, but it doesn't even compare to this ride. The other 2 boomerangs I've been on were Sidewinder and Flying Cobras, which have the best restraints. While Boomerang didn't have the jolt like the Six Flags St. Louis boomerang, it was much more painful on every single inversion. After the typical boomerang drop and fly through, the ride enters an extremely jerky cobra roll. For some reason, it was much jerkier than the other boomerang. The loop was fine, except for the backwards portion. Similar to Mind Eraser, my back hit the train hard, causing an extreme amount of pain, and in stereotypical boomerang fashion, the exit out of the backward cobra roll was unnecessarily rough. Overall, while it looked nice, Boomerang was a one and done. Number 5, Viper, ranking 93 out of 139. An aero looper is always a nice addition to the park. Viper fills the gap between mild and aggressive, so it's a good ride to fit that gap. But Viper has one of the most painful inversions on a coaster. This seems to be a theme for Darien Lake. I have to admit, this is the best looking aero looper I've seen other than Vortex. Yes, even better than the iconic Corkscrew. Viper towers over the pathways, intimidating all of the guests in line. The drop, like most other arrows, has no airtime but is still a nice thrill. The loop is intense, the next turn is a little shaky, but forceful. But the Batwing was the reason this ride plays so low. I know a lot of people praise the Batwing for how forceful it is, but even looking at the ride from a distance, you can tell that it'll leave a mark. The train whips in and out of the element, and you can see how much it'll hurt just by watching. The ride whips so quickly that riders' heads slam into the side of the restraints on both the entrance and exit of the element. While it was forceful, I couldn't appreciate the positives because of this violent whip. The rest of the ride was kind of fun and tolerable. The corkscrews were mildly shaky, but the ending tunnel was fun and smooth. Viper wasn't horrible, but that one element made me wish this ride had vest restraints. Number 4, Moto Coaster, ranking 84 out of 139. Finally, we are getting out of the painful rides. Moto Coaster is honestly a pretty fun time. I rode in the back row for my one ride and I was pleasantly surprised. I didn't expect the force on the launch. The ride had some pretty intense butterflies on the acceleration, and the whip out of the launch surprised me. The reason this doesn't rank higher is just that after the launch, there is nothing else to the ride. The seating arrangement honestly doesn't add much to the ride except for some extra whip in the turns. I enjoyed Moto Coaster, but if it was at my home park, I wouldn't ride it every time. Number 3, Predator, ranking 70 out of 139. I was shocked when I kind of enjoyed Predator, one of the worst reviewed roller coasters. Predator was pretty smooth in the front, except for one particular part, another theme in the park. Also, the Titan track part was so smooth that it felt like a different coaster. Predator's drop was surprisingly airtime full. And this isn't the bad airtime either. This is good wooden coaster airtime, like Racer. This is the same for the second airtime hill. The most painful part of the ride was the brutal turnaround, as it is barely banked. Usually I expect laterals, but because of the bouncy nature of Predator, it slams you into the seat very hard. This turn lasts quite a while before diving down yet another airtime-filled drop. All of the airtime hills ahead are full of fun airtime moments, but this middle section is pretty bad with the jerkiness. I usually enjoy a wooden coaster rumble, but it becomes a little much here. Luckily, that is short-lived because the Titan turn is incredibly smooth, where it honestly feels like an RMC. The rest of Predator is like the beginning, just without the airtime. Countless hills and small turns with a bit of a rumble. The ending is a little anticlimactic, but Predator was a surprisingly fun wooden coaster. I heard it is a lot worse in the back, but the front was great. Number 2, Ride of Steel, ranking 56 out of 139. Before you hate on me, let me explain myself. I rode in the back row, so I don't know if that had anything to do with it, but Ride of Steel was kind of an uncomfortable coaster. Coasters are supposed to be fun, and I just didn't have that much fun on Ride of Steel. But enough of that, let's get into the ride. Ride of Steel, as most know, is an intimate hypercoaster and is huge when standing next to it. The lift feels like it'll never end. While the drop and speed are phenomenal like all hypercoasters, it's the turns and hills that get me thinking negatively. Every turn, it feels like the coaster will fall apart. The train shakes violently from side to side to the point where I couldn't even put my hands up to enjoy the coaster. My favorite part of the ride for this reason was, believe it or not, the straight section. Even the airtime hills, the first of which provided no airtime, were pretty shaky. I don't know if I was just unlucky because I've never heard of this complaint, but even the airtime hills were pretty uncomfortable, almost to a magnum level of discomfort. The speed was great, the airtime was strong, and it is still a hypercoaster, so you can't go wrong. It's just that it was pretty uncomfortable for me. Let me know if I need to rewrite it in the comments because that was a weird experience. And number 1 is Tantrum, ranking 47 out of 139. As previously mentioned, roller coasters are meant to be enjoyed. Tantrum is one of those rides that isn't particularly intense, but it is just pure fun. I had a fantastic time riding Tantrum. The lift hills on Eurofighters and Infinities are always incredible and start the ride off well. Tantrum, unlike Daredevil Dive, has more open restraints, so you feel that drop a lot more, and you get whipped down it. The first inversion is intense, but still causes some great hang time, and the following whip has some decent airtime with it. The overbank has some hang, and so does the loop. The ride ends with an airtime pop into the brakes. This is my favorite experience at Darien Lake. It was the smoothest, and it was the most fun. Sorry that I didn't like Ride of Steel, but Tantrum was much better. Do not skip out on this fantastic Gerschlauer creation. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed, leave a like and subscribe. Comment below what you think of my rankings, and if you agree. Don't forget to check out my other Darien Lake videos linked below or my Darien Lake playlist. Have a great rest of your day.